the last episode, we talked about how the Samurai Spirits or Samurai Shodown series first game was created and how it took the world by storm, as it invaded every console and even jumped to other media like anime and mangas. In this episode, we will talk about how the series started evolving as it now has made a name for itself. This is the history of Samurai Shodown, Episode 2. With the massive success the first Samurai Shodown received, SNK knew they made something special that can easily rival giants like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Few months after the release of the first game, the Samurai Gumi team started working on a sequel. The positive critical reception of the first Samurai Shodown showed SNK that they are on the right track. So how would they make a worthy sequel? By rebuilding the game and graphics from scratch. Samurai Shodown 2, titled in Japan as Shin Samurai Spirits Haomaru Jugokyuhen, was released in the arcades on November 1994, more than a year after its predecessor. The Samurai Gumi team, led by Adachi-san, decided to not reuse the old sprites and instead redrew the entire cast again. While we were all blown away by the graphics of the first game, SNK was still able to wow us again when we first laid eyes on Samurai Shodown 2. The characters were more detailed, the art was better, the stages busier and eerier, and the music still absolutely superb. Most of the first game's casts are back and 4 new warriors join the fray. First we have Haomaru, the legendary warrior who defeated Amakusa, is back to find out the new source of evil. Nakoruru, the eagle-wielding priestess, is back to help Haomaru steal ambrosia once and for all. Galford, the American ninja, is ready to help the good guys along with his dog Puppy again, while having strong feelings towards Nakoru. Ukyo Tachibana, who still is suffering from tuberculosis and still looking for a rare flower for his beloved Kei. The flower he wants now grows in the Makai world. Charlotte, the French knight who now is in love with Haomaru, left her country to defeat Ambrosia. Hattori Hanzo, who has now saved his son Shinzo from Amakusa's possession, is hoping to end the evil of Ambrosia. Jubei Yagyu, siding as always with the Tokugawa shogunate, he is investigating the new source of evil. Senryo Kiyoshiro, still touring the world and hoping to make kabuki a world phenomenon. Wan Fu, who now uses a giant stone boulder rather than a giant sword, is still recruiting warriors to help his cause to unify China. Earthquake, the bandit has been enlisted by Mizuki, the game's boss, in order to stop the good guys. He is bigger and meaner than ever. Genan, despite his wife begging him to turn to a righteous path, the Makai monster is siding up with Mizuki and is bent on destroying the human world. Cham Cham, another resident of the fictional Green Hell. She is the little sister of Tam Tam from the first game. She is accompanied by a monkey, Paku Paku, who may or may not be a cursed Tam Tam, depending on canon and retcons. Genjuro Kibagami, one of the new fighters that would go on to become one of the most popular characters of the franchise. He trained with Haomaru under the same master, but Genjuro's violent tendencies and stubbornness would get him kicked from the dojo. He would later become a Hitokiri, an assassin for hire. His backstory is quite tragic and sad, and one that we would definitely visit in another series. Kafui Nicotine is a short old geezer who is the old master of Haomaru and Genjuro. He gets involved in the story as he previously dealt with Mizuki years ago, along with his friend Kuroko, the referee. Finally, Reinvented Sieger, a warrior knight from the Kingdom of Prussia. He was sent by the king to investigate the threat of Mizuki Rajoshin. All these characters come with a multitude of special moves, as even the old cast have all received upgrades. Speaking of upgrades, the gameplay of Samurai Shodown 2 took the series to a higher level. In fact, the entire gameplay was expanded and felt more responsive. Several movement tricks were added to the entire cast, like crawling forward or backward to get out of sticky situations, ducking to avoid high attacks, or small hops to jump over low strikes. Another feature that made its debut in Samurai Shodown 2 are super moves. In the previous game, the POW or Ikari gauge was used to amplify the damage of the character's attack. The more filled the gauge is, the higher the damage of your attacks. While that remains to be true for Samurai Shodown 2, the player now has the option to unleash a devastating super attack once the full rage meter is filled. And to make it less confusing, the game would display the input of these attacks so that you do not need to memorize these sometimes complicated inputs in order to get the upper hand on your opponent. Hitting an opponent with the super move will instantly break their weapon to pieces. The weapon will spawn on the ground a few seconds later, but until then, the player with no sword will have to rely on their punches and lousy kicks to win the game. The Samurai Shodown series is known for bringing new tools to the fighting game genre, and Samurai Shodown 2 is no exception. Many might not know this, but the game was the first to introduce a parry move. Parrying is the ability to deflect the opponent's move on hit without getting the damage. While Street Fighter 3 is the game that comes to mind when people think of parrying, and for good reason. But it was Samurai Shodown 2 that used this feature first, and it was something that was added at the last minute and still not widely used by players to this day. Samurai Shodown 2 will also go in the history of the series as the one with the biggest number of secrets. For the first time in an arcade fighter, you could play as either the final boss Mizuki or the referee Kuroko using a special code while on the select screen. Both characters have their own special moves and endings. Some characters also have hidden devastating techniques, like Haomaru's Tenha Fuchinzan or Nakururu's Ape Fuchi Kamui Rimuze. As an Easter egg, all characters have a special doll transformation move, where they will turn for a second to a chibi doll version of himself or herself. Unknown to most, this was done by SNK in order to advertise for the company's Samurai Spirits keychain dolls that were available at the time in crane machines. Story-wise, Samurai Shodown 2 takes place 3 years after the first game. Haomaru has defeated Amakusa and stopped the coming of Ambrosia, but a new evil entity has made its mission to bring the Dark Lord to our universe, Mizuki Rajoshin. Mizuki's story, much like Amakusa before her, is a tragic tale of suffering, abandonment, and sadness. The story of Mizuki really began 1000 years before the first game, where as an infant was thrown to the sea by her parents due to them not being able to feed her due to a terrible famine. Although an infant, her spirit was filled with rage and hatred, and that piqued the attention of Ambrosia, who helped save the little girl by making a pact with her. The little baby was washed ashore and adopted by a new family. The villagers named her Mizuki, which translates to seeing or all-seeing, since she seemed to possess mystical and clairvoyant abilities. But this was not the end of Mizuki's suffering, as at 13 years old, the villagers, and due to their pagan beliefs, decided to sacrifice a maiden, and their choice fell on her. This would be the event that unleashes Mizuki's power and turns her into Mizuki Rajoshin. She will then go on to terrorize the lands for 300 years, gaining powers and more abilities like the one to possess other beings, which is how she took over the body of a kind-spirited priestess named Bizuki. Mizuki, in her new body, would go into hibernation 100 years before the first game, but the resurrection of Amakusa awakened her from her slumber, and she started terrorizing the land once again. When Samurai Shodown 2 was released on October of 1994, it took the arcade scene by storm. The game had everything anyone would want in a sequel: better graphics, smoother gameplay, new moves, and a new colorful characters. So it was no surprise that the title was very well received, even more so than its predecessor. But what was really a surprise was the lack of home ports for the game. Besides the Neo Geo AES and Neo Geo CD version, which was released in December of the same year, Samurai Shodown 2 will go on for years without any other port.
闇に散る冥府魔道に生きる友侍魂刃に秘めんネオジオ CD 新サムライスピリッツ剣山
When doing my research, I could not find a single reason why Takara did not port the game to other consoles as it did with the first one. Whether this was some sort of first-party exclusivity that SNK was trying at the time is not known. The first port of Samurai Shodown 2 will be released on Microsoft Windows in 1996 in Japan. More home ports were released in recent years, like the excellent Xbox Live version with NetPlay and the Aka Neo Geo, which is available on pretty much all modern consoles. In terms of sales, Samurai Shodown 2 did not exceed its predecessor when it comes to AES card sales, but still was considered a success that gave SNK more reasons to release more sequels. Samurai Shodown 2 was also the first of the series to be professionally played and competed on various tournaments. In fact, there are still a big number of Samurai Shodown 2 tournaments being played to this day, like the yearly Samurai Spirits 2 World Cup, which is held in Japan. The game is also known for having some of the lousiest translations in the history of video games. Chud Okada, also known as the Game Lord, a former marketing person from SNK America, stated that efforts to localize the text were denied, as it would have costed more time and resulted in a more expensive final product. So SNK decided to release it as is. I mean, this was really bad, like Google Translate bad before Google Translate even existed. There were instances where words were misspelled, or worse, we got this amazing intro text.
今は昔の物語我が道極めんとする男あり血生臭い貴様に矜持まとうは偶然ではなかった
Much like its predecessor, Samurai Shodown 2 received some cross-media adaptations. While there was no Samurai Shodown 2 anime this time, mangaka Shiro Ono returned with a retelling of the game on pages of his new book. The manga, titled Shin Samurai Spirits Haomaru Jikokuhen, is a sequel to his first book, which sold quite well. The second book was so well received in Japan that SNK hired the mangaka to work as a designer for Samurai Shodown 3 and writer and illustrator for the Samurai Shodown RPG. Also, several ideas and concepts from the manga became canon in the subsequent games, like Amakusa's lover, Rasetsumaru, and even the bust and slash version of the characters that will change the series forever. It's 1995, and a year has passed since the release of the excellent Samurai Shodown 2. While players were enjoying the successful sequel, SNK was hard at work on another title from the series, one that would take the franchise in a different direction. On November 15, 1995, SNK released their new sword fighting game, Samurai Shodown 3 Blades of Blood, or as it is known in Japan as Samurai Spirits Zancudo Minazuki. By now you should notice that the Japanese titles never mention a number in the title. For example, Samurai Shodown 2 is Shin Samurai Spirits Haomaru Jugokuhen, and Samurai Shodown 3 is Samurai Spirits Zancudo Minazuki, without the 2 and 3 respectively. This will go on for the entirety of the franchise, and only the English version will have a number associated to the titles. Samurai Shodown 3 also marks the first time the English port has a subtitle, which is Blades of Blood in this case. Samurai Shodown 3 was a departure from the previous title. Design-wise, you can easily see that SNK took a darker route with the game. All the characters were redrawn to look edgier, more serious, and way more detailed. Characters who were on the silly side like Earthquake and Genan were gone, and even someone like Yoshiro has been redesigned to look more muscular and definitely scarier. The designs of Samurai Shodown 3 and illustrations were done by mangaka Shiro Ono, as we previously mentioned. Shiro-san was responsible for the manga adaptation for the first two games. The color palette of Samurai Shodown 3 was on the darker side as well, along with eerier stages which gave the game a serious, dark atmosphere. Besides the design of the game, the animations of Samurai Shodown 3 were also upgraded. The level of smoothness the characters show when moving was something that has not been seen before in an arcade game. Graphics were not the only aspect of Samurai Shodown that will change with the new sequel. The gameplay of Samurai Shodown 3 introduced new mechanics that would prove to be quite divisive. Gone was the easiness of just picking a character and going through the arcade mode. Samurai Shodown 3 presented the player with more options and choices. First, once you choose a character, you are given a choice of two versions of that said fighter, Slush or Bust. Slush, known as Shura in Japanese, is the somewhat normal version of the character which resembles his or her previous appearance and game style in Samurai Shodown 2. Bust, or Rasetsu in Japanese, is the edgier and different and, dare I say, evilish looking version of the character. The changes between Slush and Bust were not only about different color palettes, as each version had different special moves and even move priorities. Nakororo, for example, has her eagle Mama Haha as a companion in her Slush mode, but has a wolf named Chikuru instead in her Bust version. The Slash and Bust mode names were erroneously translated to Chivalry and Treachery in English publications, indicating that the Bust mode is somewhat rule-breaking or unfair. Many might not know this, but the origins of Slash and Bust mechanic came from Shiro Ono's excellent Samurai Shodown manga, where Haomaru had to choose between the two paths of Shura or Rasetsu in the first volume of the Samurai Spirit's Haomaru Jugokyo. The level of character or gameplay customization in Samurai Shodown 3 did not stop with the Slash and Bust selection. After the player selects a character version, he is required to select a game level, which determines some of the combat conditions for the rest of the play session. This selection also has an effect in versus matches and has nothing to do with the game's difficulty. There are three levels to select from: medium grade, beginner's class, and upper class. Medium grade, also known as Kengo in Japanese, this is the standard level. Everything works normal and no alterations are made to the gameplay. Beginner's class, Kenkaku, a level that targets inexperienced and casual players. It provides the player with 5 automatic blocks against enemy attacks, and the damage inflicted by the opponent is lower. Upper class, Kensei, a gameplay level designed for bold players who like a tough challenge. Blocking is completely removed for the player, so any enemy attack cannot be blocked. In Samurai Shodown 3, the rage gauge is always at max if this level is selected. While this level of customization can be an interesting addition in today's era where developers are looking to find a balance between appeasing fighting game veterans yet still targeting casual players. But in my honest opinion, it added more confusion to the player at the time and a level of complication that did hurt how the game was received by fans. See, Samurai Shodown veterans were used to just pick a character that they like and go berserk through arcade mode, not having to worry about fine-tuning the character. The fact of not properly explaining what each of these gameplay levels do also did not help. Personally, it was until recently that I learned the differences of each of these levels, and I have been playing the Samurai Shodown game since the first one hit the arcades. Gameplay itself was quite changed from Samurai Shodown 2. First, there are now 3 weapon buttons and only 1 kick, so the hard slashes can now be performed by just hitting the C button instead of A plus B. Now pressing that combination allowed the player to dodge moves or do a quick shift behind the opponent if in proximity to the adversary. Another odd feature is the ability to charge the rage gauge by holding A, B and C. Air block is also now possible by pressing back while jumping. Hikyaku, the run-in delivery man from the previous games, is absent, although his items still get thrown from off the screen for the same advantages or disadvantages they offer. In terms of roster, Samurai Shodown 3 slimmed the selectable characters from 16 in the previous game to 12, matching the first game of the series. This was due to the time it took SNK to redesign and redraw the game. 4 of the game's roster were brand new characters. Returning warriors included Haomaru, Nakoruru, Genjuro, Galford, Hanzo, Kyoshiro, and the first game's boss, Amakusa, officially playable in the arcades for the first time. The new fighters were all new and welcomed addition to this franchise. First and foremost, we have Shizumaru Hisame, who was the main protagonist of the game, a young kid who had his parents murdered by the game's boss Zankuro, and is later taken under Haomaru's tutelage. Basara Kubikiri, a tormented spirit who hunts the living, looking to avenge his own death and that of his beloved wife at the hand of Zankuro. Gaira Kafuin, the nephew of the old hermit Kafuin Nikotin. He is a monk in training. During his travels, he witnesses Zankuro slaughtering an entire village, but is too afraid to stop him. Ashamed by his cowardice, he decides to embark on a quest to defeat the demon. Rimururu, Nakoruru's youngest sister and one who appeared as a background character in the previous game. Rimururu has the ability to generate and control ice, and she greatly admires her older sister and, like her, strives to protect nature. Zancudo Minazuki, the final boss of the Samurai Shodown 3 game. Zankuro is the first true evil boss of the franchise, and unlike previous 2 bosses, Amakusa and Mizuki, he is no tragic character, and is evil for the sake of being an evil bastard warlord. In terms of story, Samurai Shodown 3 takes place right after the first game, and before Samurai Shodown 2. Amakusa was defeated by Haomaru, but contrary to what everyone believed, he was still alive. Years prior, a warlord by the name of Zancudo Minazuki was terrorizing and raiding villages, killing everyone he crosses paths with. He would soon get the nickname of the Demon. During one of his raids, Zankuro slayed an entire village of innocent farmers, but was unable, and for unknown reasons, to kill an infant. That infant would grow up to become Shizumaru Hisame, and after a tragic young life, which we'll delve into in our upcoming Bushido Tales web series, he meets Haomaru, who decided to train him. Now that Shizumaru feels ready, he along with Haomaru embark on a journey to find the demon, Zancudo Minazuki. Even though the game looked and animated beautifully, Samurai Shodown 3 was not very well received by fans, especially comparing it to its predecessors. Many fans at the time felt the game was rushed, and justifiably so. Samurai Shodown 3 had less characters than expected and was released with a number of game-breaking bugs. Balance was also an issue compared to Samurai Shodown 2, as there were characters way more powerful than others. Damage was also quite erratic and incredibly high for some normal moves, resulting in some rounds ending in few seconds. Collision detection was hit and miss and inconsistent compared to previous games. The complexity added by the slush and bust version of each character and gameplay level choices added more confusion rather than flexibility. All these aspects made Samurai Shodown 3 an average game despite the insane potential it had when it first was shown in all its beautiful dark atmosphere. Unlike its predecessor, Samurai Shodown 3 made it to different consoles after its arcade debut. First was the Neo Geo and Neo Geo CD, which were both made available almost 1 month after the arcade release. A few months later, on August 1996, Samurai Shodown was released on the first PlayStation worldwide. The game sold quite well, as it was the first of the franchise to hit the PlayStation. During the same month, Takara released a Game Boy version of the game called Netto Samurai Spirits Zankuro Muzoken. Similar to their adaptation of the first Samurai Shodown, Takara did an amazing job with porting and game balance, as well as content. While Kyoshiro was missing from the Game Boy version, Jubei Yagyu was added as a secret character. Unfortunately, the Game Boy version of Samurai Shodown 3 was never released outside Japan. A Sega Saturn version of the game was also released in August 1996 and was very similar to the PlayStation version. Today, Samurai Shodown 3 is available on almost every major console. While we were used to getting manga adaptation whenever a new Samurai Shodown game is released, this was unfortunately not the case for Samurai Shodown 3. A novelization written by Rei Isaki was the only related media made for the title. It was published by Asuki, which is a branch of Famitsu, the Japanese magazine, and obviously never translated to English. Less than a year after the release of the not so well received Samurai Shodown 3, SNK was ready to amend things with fans as they announced Samurai Shodown 4, known in Japan as Samurai Spirit's Amakusa Korin. The idea behind this newest release was to fix all that went wrong with the previous title. First of all, the color palette was made brighter and characters were touched up slightly to look more like anime. Gameplay was redone. While the slush and bust and 3 gameplay levels remained, several aspects that were added to Samurai Shodown 3 were removed. These included aerial blocking, the ability to charge the POW gauge, and quick shifts using A+B. A new mechanic dubbed by the community as the CD combo was added, wherein a player can press the C and D buttons together, triggering a strike that can be followed by a sequence of button taps. The single player mode now has a timer as well. Only by reaching the final boss within a specified time limit can a player see a character's ending. Hikyaku's item assists are completely gone, and the sword clashing now shows a counter to give you an idea who the winner of the clash will be, depending on how many buttons presses they have. A new mechanic that was added in Samurai Shodown 4 was the Rage Explosion. During any moment of the battle, a player can press A, B and C at the same time to activate the Rage Explosion. The character involved in this move pushes his opponent immediately but does no damage. The use of this Rage Explosion can also interrupt opponents' attacks and combos. Just after the Rage Explosion command is entered, the Rage gauge is replaced by a new meter called the Explosion gauge, which will automatically start depleting. In this state, the player can do the super move even though he did not have a full POW gauge before. Pressing A, B and C again in this state makes the character do an instant-ish high damage death move called the Fatal Flash, which if it connects, has the potential to end the round in your favor. It is important to note though, that doing a Rage Explosion will make the POW gauge disappear for the rest of the match. It wouldn't be a Samurai Shodown without blood and gore, and this new game takes things to the next level. First of all, certain moves can now trigger a fatality stance where the winning player will input a special command shown on screen for a brutal finishing move that is unique for each character, not too different from the Mortal Kombat series. Let's check out some of these finishers.
Kazama seuqles 解消 今日はこのバチ当たりめ 天草四郎時貞解消 干渉 風間和樹解消
まだいけないのに。
干渉 シャルロット解消 干渉 ナコルル解消 干渉 騎馬神源十郎解消
Second, characters now can use a special suicide move where the character sacrifices his or her own life. thus forfeiting the round. The bonus to this is that the one committing suicide will start the next round with a full POW gauge. The roster has also received a sizable upgrade. It had all the characters from Samurai Shodown 3, but also added fan favorites like Charlotte, Tam Tam, and Jubei. There were also 2 new characters that made their series debut in this game. Kazuki Kazama, member of the Kazama ninja clan specializing in the fire jutsu. He deserts the clan in order to rescue his younger sister Hazuki, who was taken by Amakusa. Sogetsu Kazama, older brother to Kazuki and Hazuki, who uses water jutsu. Unlike Kazuki, he stays with the clan and is ordered to assassinate his brother for leaving. Finally, Zancudo Minazuki, the big boss of the previous title, was unlockable in versus player mode. Story-wise, Samurai Shodown 4 takes place around the same time as its predecessor, literally weeks after, thus still before the events of Samurai Shodown 2. Zancudo Minazuki was defeated by Shizumaru, and right before striking Shizumaru in what could have been a tide-changing move, Zancudo was hit by lightning, dying in the process. Weeks later, Amakusa, presumed dead from his encounter with Haomaru during the first game, made his return known as a mysterious castle appears in the land of Shimabara, the place where Amakusa was first beheaded hundreds of years ago. Having already engulfed the Shimabara Peninsula, this castle of evil grows larger day by day. People soon call it Amakusa's castle. In order to achieve his mysterious goals, Amakusa resurrected the recently killed Zancudo, and also kidnapped a young sorceress in training, Kazuki Kazama of the Kazama clan, prompting her 2 brothers to chase after him. If SNK's goal was to amend for the Samurai Shodown 3 mistakes, then they definitely succeeded. Samurai Shodown 4 was very well received by fans in the gaming community, although it was not perfect, as there were still some issues that became apparent once the game was released in October of 1996. First, there was a noticeable cut in frames for some characters compared to the previous entry. Music, which was always a strong point for the series, was quite lacking as the game did not offer specific character themes for everyone. But even with all that, Samurai Shodown 4 was the success SNK needed after its predecessor. After its successful release in the arcades, Samurai Shodown 4 started invading home consoles, but it did take some time for that to happen. The first port of the game was, as usual, on the Neo Geo AES system, shortly followed by the Neo Geo CD on December 1996. It would then take almost a year before Samurai Shodown 4 is released on the next home console, and in this case it was the Sega Saturn, on October 1997, followed shortly by the PlayStation version. These releases were Japan only, as the game was not officially localized internationally until it hit the Wii Virtual Console in 2012. It is also worth noting that the PlayStation version included an extra character in the form of Champ Champ, who was fully redrawn to match the dark and detailed designs of this new era. The last port of the sequel will arrive 1 year later on December 1998, when SNK releases Samurai Shodown on the Neo Geo Pocket. The monochrome game was a conversion of Samurai Shodown 4 with few changes to the roster. Missing from the select screen were Charlotte and Tam Tam. However, this version included a hidden character in the form of Shiki from the Samurai Shodown 64 game, who made her official 2D debut in the portable game. Following the success of the first Samurai Shodown, SNK took the franchise through different changes as we went from the insanely successful Samurai Shodown 2, followed by a flawed number 3, then bouncing back to a pretty good number 4. Join us next episode as we see SNK take the franchise to a new game genre with the Samurai Shodown RPG, before taking the series to a third plane with the Hyper Neo Geo 64. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. There is a huge number of SNK related videos in the pipeline that you don't want to miss. This is your host Struggler, and thanks for stopping by.